They say love makes you blind, but no one ever tells you how quiet that blindness feels, how soft the lies sound when they come wrapped in affection. When I met Ryan, it wasn't love at first sight. It was slower, calmer, like standing in front of a sunrise you didn't realize was happening until everything around you started glowing. We met at a charity event my best friend dragged me to, one of those corporate mixers filled with people pretending to care about something other than themselves. I was bored, scrolling through my phone, when his voice broke through the noise. "Mind if I steal you from your screen for a moment?" I looked up, and there he was. Dark suit, easy smile, eyes that looked like they'd seen too much and still found a reason to be kind. He wasn't the kind of handsome that screamed for attention. He was the kind that lingered, the kind you remembered when you couldn't sleep. We talked for hours that night. About books, about music, about how both of us were tired of temporary people pretending to be permanent. When the night ended, he walked me to my car, and instead of asking for my number, he said, "If we're meant to see each other again, we will," and we did. A week later, I saw him at a bookstore downtown, standing exactly where I was heading. Coincidence? Maybe. But that's how every great lie begins, with something that feels like fate. He bought me coffee, we sat by the window, and he listened. Really listened. That's what hooked me. Not the charm, not the smile, but the way he made me feel seen in a world that rarely looks twice. Within weeks, he was everywhere, calling every morning, texting every night. Flowers at work, dinners by candlelight, and for the first time in years, I felt safe, or what I thought was safe. He used to say things like, "You're the only person who truly understands me. I've never felt this connected to anyone before. You make me want to be better." I believed him, every word, every sigh between the silences. Didn't realize that behind every "I love you" was a shadow, a small, quiet piece of truth he never wanted me to see. Because what I didn't know was that Ryan wasn't who he said he was. He wasn't the man I fell in love with. He was the story he built to make sure I'd never leave. It started small, the way every heartbreak does. A missed call, a delayed text, a story that didn't quite add up, but sounded sweet enough to make you let it go. At first, I told myself I was overthinking, that I'd finally found someone good, and good people didn't deserve to be doubted. But love, when built on illusion, has a way of whispering the truth through the smallest cracks. One evening, Ryan called and said he had to stay late for a client dinner. His voice was calm, steady, the kind of tone that could make you believe in anything. But when he hung up, I noticed something strange. The background noise. No restaurant clatter. No conversation hum. Just silence and faintly, the sound of the ocean. We lived hours from the coast. The next day, he showed up at my apartment with takeout and roses. His smile was disarming, warm enough to melt away my questions. But his eyes, they carried something else, something restless. "Rough day?" I asked. He smiled. "You could say that, but seeing you makes everything better." And for a while it did, until I saw the tan line on his finger, faint, barely visible. I laughed it off in my head. Maybe it was from a ring he wore before, or a watch strap. But deep down, something in me stirred. A quiet, trembling intuition that refused to be silenced. Weeks passed. Our moments grew shorter, our silences longer. He'd cancel plans last minute, his excuses neatly wrapped with charm. "Work's crazy right now. I promise I'll make it up to you." And every time I forgave him. Because love teaches you patience, but it never warns you when that patience becomes denial. Then came the night everything changed. I was on my couch, half asleep when his phone buzzed. He'd left it charging on my coffee table. I didn't mean to look, but when the screen lit up, it wasn't a name I recognized. It was a heart emoji, followed by a message that said, "I miss last night already." My chest went cold. I froze, staring at the words until they blurred. A dozen thoughts raced through me. Excuses, explanations, anything that could make it not what it seemed. But I knew. Somewhere deep inside, I already knew. When he came out of the shower, I tried to hold it together. My voice shook. "Who is she, Ryan?" He froze. "What are you talking about?" "Don't," I whispered. "Please don't make me feel crazy." I saw the text. His face changed. Not fear, not guilt. Annoyance. "You went through my phone?" "That's what they do, manipulators. They twist the blade and make you apologize for bleeding." Tears burned my eyes. "You lied to me." He sighed, rubbing his temples like I was the problem. "You're overreacting." "She's a friend. We just went out with a group. You always assume the worst." But the way he said it, calm, measured, confident, almost made me believe him again. Almost. That night, after he left, I sat in the dark for hours. The room still smelled like his cologne, warm and heavy, like a ghost that wouldn't leave. I stared at the wall, trying to understand how something that felt so real could unravel so quietly. I told myself I'd get answers, that maybe I was wrong. But deep down, I knew that when love demands you silence your intuition, it's not love anymore, it's control. A week later, I followed my gut, and what I found would shatter everything I thought I knew about him and about myself. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, flashes of the past played like a cruel movie. His laughter, his promises, his words that once felt like love, but now echoed like lies. The next morning, I decided to confront him. Not with anger, but with truth. He sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through his phone as if nothing had happened. "Why?" I asked simply. My voice didn't shake this time. "Why lie to me for so long?" He looked up, his face pale, eyes darting away. "You wouldn't have stayed if you knew who I really was," he said quietly. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was tragic. "I stayed because I loved you. But now I don't even know who you are." He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "You built a life on lies, and you expected me to live inside it," I whispered. His silence said everything. I walked out, leaving behind the walls that once held my dreams, and for the first time in years, I felt something real. Freedom. But little did I know. The lies weren't over yet. The truth he hid ran deeper and darker than I ever imagined. Weeks passed, but the unease never left me. Freedom felt good, yes, but it was haunted. Something about his words that day kept echoing in my head. "You wouldn't have stayed if you knew who I really was." I couldn't ignore it. What did that even mean? Who was he really? One night, I sat on my bed with his old laptop, the one he used to guard with his life. I almost felt guilty, but the curiosity burned stronger than fear. After several wrong passwords, one worked. It was my name. Inside, I found a folder labeled Work. But inside that folder were hundreds of pictures, not of work. They were of me. Photos from years before we even met. Some taken secretly, some clearly stolen from my old social media, and others from places I never posted publicly. My hands began to shake. How did he have these? Scrolling further, I found messages, dozens of emails between him and someone named E. The tone was cold, businesslike. The latest one said, "She still doesn't know who I am. I'll finish what we started." My heart stopped. What did he start? And who was E? I immediately packed a bag and drove to my friend Laura's place. The moment she saw me, pale and trembling, she didn't ask. She just hugged me tight. The next morning, I went to the police with what I had. They took it seriously. Turns out, the name he used wasn't even real. His ID, his job, his entire past, fabricated. He wasn't the man I thought I married. He wasn't even that man's name. When the police started digging, they found out he had been involved in multiple identity scams, Charming women, living off them, disappearing before they could figure him out. I wasn't his first victim, but here's what chilled me to my core. He had vanished 2 days before I went to the police. His apartment was empty. No traces, no clues, like he'd planned his exit long ago. Still, every night I feel like he's around. Watching. Waiting. Because sometimes, when I walk by a mirror, I swear I can see his reflection behind me. After that night, something inside me changed. Not all at once. It was quieter than that. Like a candle slowly losing its flame, I began to dim around him. I still answered his calls, still smiled when he walked in, still told myself that love meant forgiveness. But somewhere between those fragile moments of pretending, I started watching him differently. Not with affection, but with awareness. The tuan. Way he avoided eye contact when I asked about his client trips. The sudden calls that pulled him away at midnight. The scent of unfamiliar perfume that lingered faintly on his shirt. Not strong, just enough to haunt me. Every lie has a rhythm, and once you learn it, you can hear the song of deceit playing in the background of every word. One weekend, he told me he had to fly out for a business conference. I smiled and nodded, like the perfect girlfriend I'd trained myself to be. But this time, I didn't stay home. I followed him. Not far, just enough to see where the road ended. His conference wasn't at a hotel. It was at a small beach house 2 hours away. The same sound of waves I'd once heard over the phone. I parked my car down the road, my hands trembling against the steering wheel. Through the soft light spilling from the house windows, I saw him. Standing there, laughing, holding her. She wasn't just anyone. She was the woman from his social media, the one he'd called a client, the one I'd never thought to question. And in that moment, every "I love you" he'd ever said dissolved into the night air. I didn't cry right away. I just watched. Watched the truth unfold in real time. Beautiful, cruel, undeniable. When I finally drove home, the silence felt heavier than his lies ever did. The next morning, he showed up at my door like nothing had happened, coffee in hand, that same soft smile that once made my heart race. "Morning, beautiful," he said, leaning in to kiss me. I stepped back. "Don't," I whispered. He froze. "What's wrong?" I looked at him. Really looked. At the man who'd built an entire illusion and called it love. At the stranger who stood where my safety used to live. "I saw you," I said softly. "At the beach." His expression flickered. Panic, guilt, then something colder. Composure. He laughed under his breath. "You followed me? Wow. That's disappointing." And there it was again. The twist. The manipulation dressed in calm tones. But I didn't break this time. I'd spent months believing his stories. Now I finally had one of my own. The truth. "You don't get to make me feel crazy anymore," I said. And for the first time, my voice didn't shake. He opened his mouth to speak, but I closed the door before he could. That night, I sat on my balcony, watching the same stars we once called ours, and I realized something powerful. Sometimes love doesn't end with a scream. It ends with silence. The kind of silence that feels like freedom, because when the truth finally speaks, it doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be real. The days after I walked away were quieter than I expected. Not empty, not lonely. Just still. Like the world had paused, letting me catch my breath after months of holding it in. I didn't call him. I didn't answer when he tried to text. I let the flowers wilt. The emails went unopened. For the first time in a long time, I was alone. truly alone, with only my thoughts. And that's when I started noticing the pieces of me I had lost. The little habits I'd buried to accommodate him. The laughter I'd stopped because it wasn't serious enough. The dreams I'd put on hold, thinking they weren't important to someone who only cared about his reflection. I began to reclaim them. Slowly, a coffee in the morning without guilt, a book read without interruption, a smile given freely, not measured by how it made him feel. I even started going back to the bookstore, the place where it all began. Standing there, surrounded by stories of love and loss, I realized something. Every great story has conflict, but it's the protagonist who decides the ending, and I was tired of being a supporting character in someone else's lie. Weeks later, Ryan tried to come back. He knocked on my door like he always had, calm, confident, rehearsed. "Can we talk?" he asked, eyes soft but calculating. I let him in. For 10 minutes, I listened. The excuses, the promises, the rehearsed charm meant to disarm me. And then I spoke, my voice steady, my heart unmoved. "No, the story you wrote for me isn't mine. I'm done living in your shadows." He left. This time without pleading, without charm, and I closed the door. After that, life didn't magically get easier. The nights were sometimes heavy, the memories still whispered, but with each passing day, I felt lighter, stronger, whole. I realized love isn't about perfect gestures or words that sound sweet. It's about trust, transparency, respect. And when someone chooses lies over you, the real love, the kind that lasts, is the one you give yourself. Because the hardest heartbreak can also be the most liberating. And as I walked down the city streets, sunlight warming my face, I felt it. The quiet, undeniable truth of freedom, of a life reclaimed. I had loved, I had lost, and now I was finally living. Months passed. Life unfolded quietly, like a book slowly turning its pages without fanfare. I had rebuilt myself, not entirely, but enough to breathe without fear of collapse. My apartment felt like mine again. My mornings felt like my own. Evenings weren't lonely anymore. They were filled with small joys. Tea by the window, music that matched my mood, books that didn't judge me for laughing aloud. And then, he returned. Not in person. Not yet. Through the shadowy corridors of the digital world he once claimed he didn't need. A message. At first, I didn't recognize the number. Then I did. "Ryan. I miss you," it read. Simple, clean, deceptive. My fingers hovered over the screen, heart hammering. Not with longing, but with caution, with anger, with the clarity that comes only after you've survived someone's manipulation. I didn't reply. But over the next few days, the messages kept coming. Polite, apologetic, confessional. I was wrong. I didn't realize what I had until it was gone. "I can be better if you just give me a chance." I read each one, carefully. Analyzed the words, the timing, the tone. Every sentence was designed to pull me back, to rewrite the story I had already lived. And I hated it. Hated him. Hated how easily his words could stir something primal inside me, the part that had once believed in him completely. But I had changed. One rainy evening, I walked past the little cafe near my apartment, the one he used to love. And there he was, standing alone, holding a coffee, scanning the streets as if he expected me to appear from nowhere. The old fear rose, instinctive, sharp. But it didn't control me. Instead, I stopped, looked, and then I walked past. He called my name. I didn't turn. His voice broke slightly, just enough to show the cracks he tried so hard to hide. For the first time, I realized he wasn't the man I fell in love with. He was the man I had known, a shadow of charm and lies, desperate to control a story that was never his to write. The truth had finally settled in me, steady and unshakable. Love doesn't chase. Love doesn't manipulate. Love trusts, respects, and elevates, not confines or deceives. In the weeks that followed, I let myself feel fully again. My joys, my fears, my mistakes, my growth. I laughed louder, walked taller, and learned that silence can be stronger than confrontation. And then, unexpectedly, life offered me a new presence. A colleague at work, someone I'd barely noticed before, began to show genuine interest in my thoughts, my passions, my small quirks. No grand gestures, no manipulations, just patience, just presence. And slowly, tentatively, I realized that trust could be rebuilt. That love could exist without shadows looming over it. But this time, I would be the author of my own story. No distractions, no illusions, no lies wrapped in charm. Because I had learned the hardest lesson of all. The person you must never lie to is yourself. And as the sun rose one morning, painting the city in gold, I smiled. Not at someone else. Not at promises or apologies, but at me. For the first time in a long time, I was free. Truly, completely free. Time has a way of softening scars, not erasing them. But scars have a way of teaching you the weight and worth of love, not the fleeting kind that whispers lies, but the kind that honors you even when the world does not. I kept my distance from Ryan. His attempts to contact me became fewer, almost apologetic in their silence, as if he sensed that I no longer belonged to his story. And that realization, that I no longer needed him to define me, was liberating. Work became my refuge. Mornings were mine to linger in sunlight, coffee in hand, watching the city wake. Evenings were mine to create, to explore, to breathe. I started writing again. Not for him, not for anyone, but for me. Pages filled with reflections, small victories, and dreams I had once tucked away in corners, believing I had no right to claim them. Then, life surprised me. A new friend, James, appeared in my world quietly, like a gentle current. We met at a workshop, bonding over shared passions and small jokes. No grand gestures, no sudden promises, just genuine conversation, laughter that came naturally, and the kind of trust that grows slowly, steadily. With James, I learned something I hadn't in years. Love doesn't have to be dramatic to be real. It doesn't have to come with tension, manipulation, or fear. It can be soft, safe, and nurturing, a love that strengthens rather than confines. One evening, months later, Ryan appeared again. This time in person, bold as ever, standing at the cafe where I often wrote. "I need to talk to you," he said. His eyes searched mine for something. Forgiveness, attention, control. I looked at him, and for a moment the past tugged at me, the memories of laughter, of hope, of the man I thought he was. But that man never existed. Only a shadow of words and promises that were never meant to be kept. "I'm done," I said firmly, not angrily, not bitterly, just firmly. His face fell, realizing that the power he once held over me was gone. He nodded once, stiffly, and left. No fight, no persuasion, no lies left to tell. As the door closed behind him, I felt the last of the weight lift from my chest. I walked back to my notebook, picked up my pen, and smiled. The story of my heartbreak had become the story of my awakening. I had loved deeply, I had been deceived. I had been broken. But in the ashes of that pain, I found myself, stronger, wiser, free. And as the city lights flickered outside my window, I realized the future isn't built by those who betray us. It's built by the ones who stay true, first to themselves, and then to the love they are ready to give. For the first time in years, I felt it in my bones. I am enough. I am whole. And I will never again settle for anything less than what I deserve. The past had its shadows, but the dawn belonged to me. And this time, I would walk into it with open eyes, an open heart, and unshakable strength. Life has a quiet way of bringing clarity. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it shouts, but eventually the truth finds you, like sunlight spilling through a crack in a dark room. Months had passed since Ryan's final attempt. I no longer feared his presence. I no longer felt the tug of lies wrapped in charm. The shadow that once haunted my heart had faded, replaced by something brighter, steadier, my own resilience, work, friendships, and the small joys of everyday life became my anchors. I learned to savor solitude without guilt, to embrace laughter without fear, and to dream without hesitation. Each day was a reminder that I had survived the lie, and I was stronger for it. And then, slowly, love came again, not like before, not desperate, not blinding, but soft, gentle, patient. James was no grand hero or mysterious stranger. He was real, present, honest. He listened without judgment. He laughed without pretense. He offered comfort without strings. We walked through the park one late afternoon, golden light spilling over autumn leaves. He stopped, turning to me with a tentative smile. "You've grown so much," he said. "I admire how strong you are, how you love without fear now." I smiled back, feeling warmth spread through me. "I've learned that love doesn't hurt if it's real. The rest teaches you about yourself." He nodded, and in that moment, I realized something profound. I had stopped chasing love. Instead, love had found me. Not in lies. Not in illusions, but in honesty, respect, and the quiet certainty of shared moments. That night, I walked home under a sky dotted with stars. I passed the cafe where Ryan once tried to pull me back into his world of shadows. I paused for a moment, thinking of him. Not with anger, not with sorrow, but with gratitude, because without him, I would not have known my strength. Without his lies, I would not have discovered my truth. I had loved. I had lost. I had endured. And now I was ready to live, fully, freely, unapologetically. Life's beauty is in its full circle. The pain of betrayal transforms into the wisdom of self-respect. The heartbreak of deception paves the path for authentic connection. And the darkest shadows of the past make the light of tomorrow all the more brilliant. I opened my notebook that night and began to write, "I am free. I am whole. I am ready for the love I deserve. The love that sees me, honors me, and celebrates me without pretense. The past will always be a part of me, but it no longer defines me. Today, I choose myself." And as I wrote, I knew it was true. The end of one story had become the beginning of another. One written not by lies, not by shadows, but by the strongest hand of all, my own. The future stretched ahead, bright and untamed, and for the first time in my life, I was not afraid to step into it. Years passed, but I never forgot what I had learned. The memory of Ryan's lies lingered like a shadow at the edge of my vision. Faint, distant, and powerless, it no longer scared me. It didn't define me. I built a life that was mine, brick by brick, choice by choice. Morning light found me on my balcony, a steaming cup of coffee in hand, watching the city awaken with a calm that once felt impossible. My apartment smelled of vanilla candles, old books, and the faint scent of rain. the smells I had always loved but neglected when I had lost myself in someone else. Work became more than a job. It became a passion. I threw myself into my writing, my art, my creativity, things that had been dormant, waiting for permission to bloom. I traveled alone, wandered streets I had never seen, and reveled in the freedom of unplanned adventures. Every journey, every quiet night under the stars reminded me of the truth. I had survived, and survival felt like grace. And then there was love, the real kind. It didn't roar. It didn't demand. It arrived in gestures as simple as a shared smile over a cup of tea, a hand held during a rainy walk, and a laugh that echoed my own without apology. James remained, patient, present, steady. He never tried to fix me or rewrite my past. Instead, he marveled at the person I had become, the strength I had unearthed in the ashes of betrayal. Together, we built something delicate but unbreakable, a love rooted in trust, honesty, and the quiet understanding that we were both complete on our own. I learned to love myself fully, to celebrate my independence, to chase dreams with reckless curiosity, to embrace silence without fear, laughter without reservation, and solitude without shame. Evenings often found me on the balcony, watching sunsets paint the sky in hues I had long forgotten to notice. I thought of Ryan sometimes, not with bitterness, not with sorrow, but as a teacher in disguise. Without him, I would not have discovered the strength hidden beneath my tenderness. Without his deception, I would not have known the taste of truth and freedom. I wrote about it all, my heartbreaks, my lessons, my triumphs, in notebooks that grew into stories that reminded me, and anyone who read them, that pain can transform into power, that loss can become liberation, and that love can exist without sacrifice of self. One afternoon, I walked through the park, watching children play and couples laugh. A breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers, warm and alive. James walked beside me, silent and content, matching my pace without asking for more than the present. And in that simplicity, I realized the most profound truth. Happiness isn't loud, it isn't dramatic, it isn't dependent on anyone but yourself. I had once believed love meant losing yourself in someone else's story. Now I knew that love meant standing in your own light and letting someone choose to stand beside you, freely, gently, and without shadows. I stopped by the little cafe where Ryan had once tried to reclaim me. I smiled at the barista, sipped my latte, and left, feeling no pull toward the past. The past was a map of lessons, not a chain, and as the sun set that evening, casting golden light over the city, I whispered to myself, a vow, a truth, a promise. I will never settle for lies again. I will never forget my worth. I will live fully, love bravely, and remain true to myself. Always. The life I had once feared I'd never have was here. Not perfect, but mine. Not predictable, but free. Not borrowed, but wholly earned. And in that moment I realized the most beautiful love story I could ever live was the one I wrote for myself. Just when life had begun to feel steady, predictable, and safe, the universe reminded me that freedom and growth didn't mean immunity from the past. It started subtly, a chance encounter. I was attending a gallery opening downtown, surrounded by paintings that bled emotion onto canvas. The hum of conversation was warm, easy, and then I saw him, Ryan. Not bold, not demanding, not the shadow I had once feared, but quiet, watching from across the room, observing me. For a heartbeat, the old fear flickered, sharp and electric. Then it passed, because I knew now what I hadn't before. I wasn't the same woman he had tried to manipulate. Charm and confine. I was stronger, wiser, whole. He approached, careful, measured, almost apologetic. I didn't expect to see you here, he said softly, avoiding my gaze. I studied him, noting the lines in his face, the way his posture had changed, the way life had shaped him, just as it had shaped me. I didn't expect to see you either, I replied, calm and steady. No anger, no trembling, no leftover longing. He hesitated, then continued. I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. I know it doesn't change what I did. But I held up a hand. I know. The words felt strange on my tongue. Forgiving, but not softening. Acknowledging, but not erasing. We talked briefly, carefully, navigating the thin line between closure and temptation. And then I walked away. The gallery lights reflected off the polished floor as I moved through the crowd, my chest open, my spine straight. I realized something profound. Closure isn't always a confrontation. Sometimes, it's walking away while fully aware of the power you now hold over your own life. That night, I walked home under a sky streaked with stars, James waiting with warm tea and quiet understanding. I told him nothing of Ryan's presence, because it didn't matter. The shadow had no claim here. The real story was the one I was living now. A life filled with honesty, trust, and love that didn't ask me to shrink. But the universe had one more lesson. Weeks later, I received a message, not from Ryan, but from someone completely unexpected. A woman he had wronged before me, reaching out in quiet camaraderie, sharing her story, her heartbreak, her path toward healing. I realized then that the lies weren't isolated. They were a pattern, a chain that stretched far beyond me. And yet, in this truth, I found strength, not just for myself, but for the collective awareness that pain can be transformed into wisdom, empathy, and connection. I began to write again, not just for me, but for those like me, those who had been misled, manipulated, or broken by love that was never theirs to claim. My words became a beacon, my story a map for those navigating shadows, teaching them the greatest lesson I had learned. You can survive. You can reclaim yourself. You can love again, but only on your own terms. And as the months turned into years, I realized something even deeper. Life's unexpected turns, even the painful ones, are never about trapping us. They are about shaping us. They are about showing us what we can endure, what we can rise above, and how brightly we can shine once we stop fearing the darkness. That night, as I looked out over the city lights from my balcony, I whispered to myself, not in anger, not in sorrow, but in triumph, I am unbroken. I am fearless. I am free. And I knew without doubt that no shadow, not Ryan, not anyone, would ever dim the life I had chosen. Years had passed since the first lie had shattered my world. And yet, in the quiet corners of my life, I felt more alive than ever. The pain, the heartbreak, the manipulation. They were no longer chains. They were lessons etched into the core of who I had become. I had learned to see people clearly, to trust carefully, and to love deeply, but always on my terms. I had learned that strength wasn't measured by how much you could endure silently, but by how fully you could reclaim your joy. Work and creativity had become more than tools of distraction. They were my sanctuary. I wrote stories of love and betrayal, of heartbreak and healing, pouring every ounce of truth I had learned into each page. People read them. They reached out. They thanked me. I realized that my pain, once so isolating, had become a bridge, connecting hearts, illuminating paths, and showing others that survival is not only possible, but beautiful. And love? Love had found me again, not in drama or deception, but in gentleness. James stood beside me, not to complete me, but to walk with me. We laughed. We dreamed. We argued occasionally, like real people, but always with respect. Every touch, every glance, every small shared moment reaffirmed a truth I had discovered long ago. Love is not about possession. It is about presence. One autumn evening, I walked through the park where the trees blazed with gold and red. Children ran and played, couples whispered in corners, and the wind carried the faint scent of rain. I watched life unfold around me and felt a profound sense of gratitude. For the first time, I didn't fear the past. I didn't dread the shadows. I didn't question my worth. I thought of Ryan, of the lies, of the heartbreak, and instead of anger, I felt clarity. I had loved. I had been deceived. I had survived, and now I was free to live, fully, fiercely, and without compromise. I began teaching workshops, sharing my experiences with young women who were just beginning to navigate love, heartbreak, and self-discovery. I spoke not from theory, but from lived experience. I taught them the most important lesson I had learned. Your worth is not defined by anyone else's perception of you. Your life is yours to write. Love deeply, but never at the expense of your truth. And slowly, over the years, I realized that my story was no longer just about me. It was about every woman who had been silenced, misled, or doubted. It was about showing that heartbreak could be transformed into empowerment, that lies could be turned into lessons, that pain could be a guide toward freedom, strength, and authentic connection. I traveled to cities I had only dreamed of, explored cultures that broadened my mind, and wrote stories that inspired hearts. I experienced the full spectrum of life: joy, sorrow, love, loss, and everything in between. One evening, as James and I watched the sunset from a quiet hillside, I whispered, "I never thought I'd feel this peace, this joy, this life." He smiled, squeezing my hand. "And it's only just beginning," he said. I looked out at the horizon, golden light spilling across the earth, and realized he was right. I had survived the lies, the heartbreak, and the shadows. I had reclaimed myself completely. And now, I was living a life that was not only free, but fully mine, because true happiness, I had discovered, isn't found in others. It's found in yourself, in your choices, in your courage, in the life you refuse to compromise. And as the sun disappeared behind the hills, painting the sky with fire, I finally understood. I had loved. I had lost. I had healed. And now I was living, not just existing, not just surviving, truly, wholly, and beautifully living. The story that began with lies had ended with truth. The story that began in heartbreak had unfolded into freedom, purpose, and love, real love, untainted by deception. And for the first time in my life, I felt completely, undeniably, unstoppable. Years had gone by since the lies, the heartbreak, and the shadows that once haunted me. And yet, life continued to teach me that freedom isn't a destination. It's a journey. I had built a life full of light, yet every now and then, reminders of the past would appear, a sudden memory, a whisper of emotion, a fleeting dream of the man I once loved, or thought I had loved. But I no longer feared those shadows. Instead, I welcomed them as teachers, proof of how far I had come. Work had evolved into a calling. I launched workshops and mentorship programs for women navigating betrayal, heartbreak, and self-doubt. I shared my story not to relive pain, but to give others the courage to rise above it. And every woman I met, every tear, every smile, every breakthrough, reminded me that survival is not just personal, it ripples outward, touching lives you may never know you've changed. Love, too, had grown. James remained steady, kind, patient, the kind of love that felt like home without walls. But I also discovered a new kind of love. Love for life itself, for mornings bathed in golden light, for quiet walks through rain-soaked streets, for books, music, and moments that belonged only to me, for the pure joy of knowing I was whole without needing anyone to complete me. One morning, I found myself standing on a cliffside overlooking the ocean, the same ocean Ryan had once lied about, the one that had carried whispers of betrayal. The waves crashed against the rocks below, relentless, beautiful, untamed. And I realized something profound. Life was not about avoiding pain or betrayal. It was about learning to rise, over and over to meet the waves with courage and to let them wash over you without fear. I began writing again. Not just stories, but reflections, essays, and guides for those who had lost their way in love, in lies, or in themselves. People reached out from across the globe, sharing their journeys, their victories, and their gratitude. And every message reminded me that the life I had built, strong, fearless and full, was not just mine. It was a beacon. Then, one evening as I walked through the city streets, golden leaves falling softly around me, I thought of Ryan. I thought of the lies, the pain, the heartbreak. And I smiled, because I had learned something he never could teach me. You cannot control the past. You cannot rewrite the choices of others. But you can always choose yourself, always. Choose truth, always choose freedom, always. Choose the life you deserve. I stopped at a small cafe, sipping my tea, watching the world move around me. Life was unpredictable, imperfect, and utterly beautiful. And I realized that happiness wasn't a place. It wasn't a person. It wasn't even a moment. It was a state of being. The ability to stand tall in your own light, to love boldly, to live fully, and to step into each day with open eyes and an open heart. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant golds and pinks, I whispered to myself, a vow to carry forever. I am free. I am whole. I am alive. And I will never let anyone take that from me again. And with that, I walked into the night, unafraid of the shadows, unbound by the past, and fully, completely, beautifully myself. Years had transformed me in ways I could never have imagined. The pain of the past, the heartbreak, and the lies were no longer wounds. They were the roots of the person I had become. Strong, compassionate, wise, unbreakable. I had built more than a life. I had built a legacy. My workshops had grown into an international movement, helping thousands of women reclaim their power, their voices, and their joy. Letters arrived from across the world. Stories of lives changed because someone had dared to survive, to rise and to share their truth. And every time I read one, I felt a quiet pride, not in myself alone, but in the collective courage we had all discovered together. Love had evolved. 2. James and I had created a partnership built on unwavering trust and mutual respect. We celebrated life's small moments, cooking together, walking in quiet forests, reading side by side. We celebrated life's big moments, launching community programs, traveling to new countries, exploring cultures and ideas that broadened our hearts and minds. I had learned the beauty of balance, to love deeply, without losing myself, to pursue passion, without neglecting presence, to forgive without forgetting, to heal without hiding, and to teach without preaching. One morning, I woke to the sound of waves crashing against the shore. I had rented a small coastal retreat to write, reflect, and plan the next chapter of my life. The same ocean that had once carried whispers of deception now felt like a mirror of my own strength. Vast, untamed, and endlessly beautiful. I walked along the sand, feeling the cool water lap at my feet, and realized that every choice, every heartbreak, every struggle had led me here, to a place where I could fully embrace who I was, where my joy wasn't dependent on anyone else's approval or affection. I was free. Not just from Ryan, not just from heartbreak, but from fear, self-doubt, and the constraints I had once placed on myself. I began writing a book, a memoir of survival, resilience and empowerment, not for fame, not for fortune, but for anyone who had ever felt small, broken, or silenced. Each word carried the weight of experience, the clarity of lessons learned, and the fire of a woman who refused to settle for less than she deserved. And then, one afternoon, a young woman approached me after a speaking event. Her eyes were wide, her voice trembling. "I don't know if you'll understand," she said, "but your story, it saved me. It made me believe I could be stronger than the pain I've endured." I smiled, placing a hand on hers. "I do understand," I whispered. Because I've been there, and you are stronger than you know. Keep walking forward, and never forget that your life is yours to write. That night, as James and I sat on the balcony of our home, overlooking the city lights, I felt a profound sense of peace. The world could be chaotic, unfair and unpredictable, but within it, we could create sanctuaries of love, purpose, and authenticity. I had loved, I had been deceived, I had lost, and I had risen. And now, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving, not in spite of the past, but because of it. The shadows no longer haunted me. They existed only as reminders of the light I had found. As I looked at the horizon, golden and infinite, I knew this was just the beginning. The life I had chosen, fully, unapologetically, powerfully, was a story without end. A story of courage, love, freedom, and the undeniable truth that when you honor yourself first, the world bends beautifully around you. I whispered into the evening air. I am free. I am whole. I am alive. I am unstoppable. And for the first time, I didn't just believe it, I lived it. The past had shaped me, but it no longer defined me. The future awaited, vast, luminous and entirely mine, and I was ready. By now, I had become the author of my own destiny. Every choice I made, every step I took, was deliberate, grounded in the knowledge that my worth was mine alone to define. The woman I had once been, timid, trusting, vulnerable, had grown into someone unshakable. The heartbreaks of my past had become the foundation of my strength, the crucible that forged the person I had always needed to become. I had built more than a life. I had built a world where love was kind, honest, and reciprocal. A world where pain was acknowledged but never allowed to dictate my path. A world where every woman who had been silenced could find her voice, her courage, and her freedom. My work had expanded beyond workshops. I started a foundation, helping women across the globe reclaim their independence and confidence. Letters and messages poured in daily, stories of transformation and resilience, proof that what I had endured was not in vain. James and I continued to grow together, but never at the cost of ourselves. We traveled to remote mountains, quiet beaches, and bustling cities, always learning, always expanding our horizons. Love with him was effortless, grounded in mutual respect and admiration, never dependent on pretense or drama. And yet, life still surprised me. One afternoon, while visiting a small coastal village, I was approached by a young girl, no older than 14. Her eyes were filled with a mixture of fear and hope, her voice trembling. I don't know if you can help me, she whispered, but your story, it gives me courage. It makes me think I can be strong too. I knelt down beside her, holding her hands in mine. You can, I said softly. You already are. Never let anyone make you believe otherwise. Your life is yours. Write it with courage, and no one can ever take it from you. Her smile was radiant, the kind that lights up even the darkest corners. And in that moment, I realized that my purpose was bigger than I had ever imagined. It was not just about surviving my own story. It was about inspiring countless others to rise from theirs. That evening, James and I watched the sun sink into the ocean, painting the sky in brilliant golds and pinks. I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude, not just for the life I had built, but for every trial that had led me here. The world I had once feared would define me was now a canvas of my own creation. Every choice, every love, every triumph, deliberate, intentional, and unapologetically mine. I whispered into the breeze, I am free, I am powerful, I am alive, and I will continue to build a world that reflects the strength I carry within. And in that moment, I knew without doubt, the shadows of the past had lost their grip. The life I had dreamed of, whole, radiant, fearless, was not only real, but thriving. And I was ready for every sunrise, every challenge, every joy that awaited me in the world I had built. Because I had learned the most important truth of all. Freedom is not given. It is claimed. Strength is not born. It is forged. And the life worth living is the one you create for yourself. I was living that life, fully, beautifully, and without compromise, and nothing, not even the ghosts of my past, could take it from me.